We're actually going to do something, especially with the young people, on the very back page. And so if you'll turn over to the back, if you have the handout. When Marty called, he had some of the topics, and when it came to heart, since my name is Hartman, when I write to our grandkids a lot of times, then I'll just draw a heart and then a little stick man beside it, the Hartman grandparents. And so I figured I have an invested interest in a topic like the heart from Proverbs, and so that's why I asked to do that. For our young people, when our kids are going through school, one of the things that we talked about a lot is that we want you to be the very best student in school you can be, because we want you to be a lifetime Bible student. And think about that. We want you to be the very best student you can be in school, because we want you to be a lifetime Bible student. And whether you're finishing school, university, a project or something, this is something I have kept taped inside where the mirror where I shave and things. The first part of all things is a fortune cookie. And looking at this, a fortune cookie simply said, a goal is a dream with a plan and a deadline. And for some of you, the next goal may be finishing the next level of school, maybe going to university, maybe going to trade school. All of us at different times have things that we have wanted to do, but it's still just a wish until a dream has a plan and a deadline. I'll leave you to read most of these, but what I want you to notice is how often something is said about our heart, how often Proverbs and other things, like, for example, Proverbs 16:3, commit your work to the Lord, your plans will be established. 16:9, a man's mind plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. 1 Chronicles 28:9 isn't in our outline tonight on the other side, but look at this. Know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart, with a willing mind. The Lord searches the hearts and understands every plan and thought. For some of us guys, this is getting easier, but God knows the hairs on your head right now. We don't, but God does. And just as simple as that is, just let that sink in. God knows the hairs in your head. Even before a word is in our tongue, thou knowest it altogether, O Lord. We can sometimes close our mouth and other people don't know what we were thinking, but God does. And to be known so intimately and so close, the Lord searches the heart. And that's where we're going to end tonight. But I'll just leave that with you. Some of you may run a copy of that off when you're working on something. I've worked on a couple of projects through the years, and this has always been something I've looked at, because the other thing we told our kids, if you make straight A's, you're on the Honor Society National Merit Finalist, but you lose your soul, you've lost everything. Anything that we do on earth is not worth becoming an idol that comes between us and God. And we want to be prayerful and thoughtful and pray that God will work with us and help us with our intentions. So if you turn to the very front, we'll just do some highlights as we go through. And part of this will be left for the Bereans if you want to go back and look at some more specific things as we go through this. Again and again, we're going to come back to this simple term: trust in the Lord with all of your heart. That's going to be a refrain that we're going to hear over and over and again. And what we like to do tonight, and the CI always stands for central idea, Before we finish, I want us to compare how Solomon wrote, which is inspired and is fabulous, compared to how he lived. There's a lot of people who, rather than learning something new, need to live up to what they already know. And by the end of his life, Solomon did not live up to so many of the things that he had written and had said so well. I'm in an Old Testament class, and this is number one, and this has just stuck with me. Our teacher said, as you read through Scripture, always notice the first time God introduces us to a term, a word, or a concept. Quick example. God tells Abraham to take his son up to the mountain. And in Genesis 22, for the first time in the Bible, we're introduced to the word love. How significant is the word love through the rest of the Bible? Take your son whom you love. The lad and I will go yonder and we will worship and we will return. The first time worship is used in the Bible is in Genesis 22. How significant is worship? The first time the word lamb is used in terms of a sacrifice. Father, where's the lamb? Where's the offering? And so I just would encourage you, as you just come across things, and they're not all in Genesis, but just God is going to introduce us to different words at different times. And here's where I want us to start. And when I do heart, we're going to go from the physical to the spiritual, but we have a spiritual heart because God has a heart. Every one of us have a spiritual heart. Our ability to think, reason, the mind and the soul, and all this is in there as well. But notice Genesis 6, 5 and 6. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth. And look at the contrast. Every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The Lord regretted he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. We are made in the image of God, and being made in the image of God, you and I have a spiritual heart because God has a heart. After the flood, Genesis 8:21, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. So for you and I, where does our heart fit into God's plan? And we're going to talk about this in a couple of ways. Jesus is asked either, teacher, which is the greatest, which is the first? And notice very carefully, you shall love the Lord your God with what? All of your heart. I tell parents, especially with our young kids, if we don't win our kids' hearts, we don't have to worry about the rest of it. Isn't that right? If we don't win our kids' hearts as they grow up, you don't have to worry about all the rest of the things that they might and should and could do. Love the Lord your God. And I still do this physically, not every day, but sometimes several times a day. And watch very carefully. Love the Lord, and I think with my heart. I think of this as the soul where I breathe. Love the Lord with your mind. And love the Lord with your strength. And sometimes there's several times a day I just stop and think, in my life today, one of the things I want to focus on is that today I want to give him my heart, and I want to love him with my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength. I loved having classes with Brother McCord, and he asked a question one morning. I didn't dare answer because I knew there was something there, but Brother McCord just said, what is the New Testament? And a lot of times he had a little New Testament in his hands, and he said, what is a New Testament? And different ones said different things, and someone finally said 27 books or things. And he quoted to us 2 Corinthians 3, 2 and 3. You yourselves are our letter of recommendation, notice, written where? On our hearts, known to be read by all. You're a letter from Christ, and the covenant is not written with ink. So there's a technicality. It's not the 27 books. Yes, we wouldn't know the covenant without them, but the actual covenant is not, it's not written with ink, and neither is it written with stone. Where is it written? It's written on our hearts. And the reason why trusting the Lord with all your heart, guarding your heart is so important is that in contrast to the covenant on Mount Sinai, written on stone, and the people were taught, know the Lord from the time that they were small till they grew up, the new covenant with us is written on our hearts when we become a part of the new covenant, being raised to walk in newness of life from the waters of baptism. This is going to go very quickly. We could do the whole lesson on this. Our missions teacher oftentimes told us, as you go to another country, not only find out things like artifacts and events and holidays and stuff, how do they function? And so from that, when I read through our Old Testament, and we're coming back to the poetry part here very quickly, but the one word I use for the Torah, the first 5 books, is the word identity. And again, quoting Jesus, what was God's people's identity? The first people have been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. They have been brought out. They have been physically redeemed. And they are told, love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. Very quickly, again, Old Testament class, Jack Vansel said, what is the middle of the Torah, the law? And he turned his hand sideways and he went, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And he said, it's Leviticus, but then he said, what is the middle of Leviticus? In chapter 16, it's the day of At-One-Ment. And for people who had been pushed away physically, who had been enslaved, they're coming in and blood was sprinkled on them through the covenant. The day of atonement is a day of At-One-Ment with God. And he said the center of the Torah was God bringing people back to him on the day of At-One-Ment. The books of history, Joshua down through poetry, are conclusions. How did God people keep their identity? One of the saddest verses, we're going to have 2 or 3 tonight, in the Old Testament for me is, there arose a generation that did what? That knew not the Lord. Oh, he was not like his father David. And your books of history from Joshua all the way through Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther will give us conclusions about how God's people kept their identity. But the part that I'm doing this for is that when you come to the books of poetry, the books of poetry commend in poetical form what the law commands. God's going to command this, 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 and this. And how does the book of Psalms start? Happy is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of the scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. In his law he meditates day and night. What a wonderful example. He will be like a tree planted by rivers of water. So when I read the books of poetry, I oftentimes hear that refrain, the books of poetry are going to commend to us in poetical form the things that were commanded in the law. When you come to the books of prophecy, 2 things happen. F-O-R-T-H, the prophet will say, thus saith the Lord to the people. And then through inspiration, he will, F-O-R-E, he will foretell the coming of Christ in the church. And because we're going to be looking at some things in the books of poetry, that I wanted to do that. Solomon's spiritual advantages, and there's going to be several verses we're not going to get to, but for someone who wrote so well, look at these advantages. Number 1, he's the son of the man after God's own heart. Yes, David was very busy, a lot of things happened, but especially in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, we're going to keep hearing this refrain, my son. Oh, my father taught me. And one of Solomon's specific advantages is he grows up around the man after God's own heart. The names, Solomon itself means peace, to be made whole or complete. I have a dear friend, Stanton Sykes, and when his firstborn was born, he named him Jed. Okay, in my generation, if you watched TV a few years ago and you heard Jed, you thought of the Clampetts. And I'm just thinking, someone who's as spiritually minded as Stanton Sykes surely didn't name his firstborn after the Clampetts. When I got to talk to him about it, he said, have you ever noticed Solomon's nickname that was given to him by God? Jedediah. Jedediah means beloved of the Lord, the friend of God. How does the ministry of our Lord start? He is wet in the Jordan River. The Spirit descends upon him like a dove. And what does the voice say? This is my beloved Son. And look at these wonderful names. Peace, wholeness, happiness, wellness. And then God also gives him this very special nickname, beloved of the Lord. He's cherished and loved by God. Solomon reigned in one of the most peaceful times in Israel's history. When you look at the Assyrians, Babylonians, and Persians, anytime Israel is strong, these other nations are in decline. In addition to that, David had conquered so many of the things. And this is the one that just kind of gives me the chills. God specifically appears to him twice. And you think, how many wonderful people in the Old Testament did God never specifically appear to? And twice God is going to appear to Solomon. And Solomon builds the temple, the dwelling place of God on earth. So if you turn to the next page, we're going to do highlights. Here are admonitions of a father to a son. And like I said, many of these words we won't do. And for those who are listening who don't have this, I'll just list the verse and then the highlight. 1 Chronicles 22:7. My son, I had it in my heart, says David, to build a house to the name of the Lord. And then he gives admonitions in 22:19. Set your mind and heart to seek the Lord. Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant and the vessels into the house built. 28:2. I had it in my heart to build a house for the rest of the covenant. And then here it comes in 28:9. And again, listen to the father's admonition to a son. Know the God of your father. Serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all the hearts and understands every plan. And if you look down at 29 and 18, direct their hearts toward you, and with a whole heart may he keep your commandments. There's a lot more there, but let me just make a very simple point. Look at the number of times that the father David gives specific admonitions to his son Solomon concerning his heart. Obviously, his spiritual heart. When the temple is built, 1 Kings 8:23, there is no God like you in heaven above or on the earth beneath, keeping covenant and showing steadfast love to your servants who walk before you with all of their heart. And 1 Kings 8:39, you know the hearts of the children of men. And if you go to the next page. Let your heart be wholly true to the Lord our God, walking in his statutes. 2 Chronicles 6:14, showing steadfast love to your servants who walk before you with all of their heart. In Proverbs 4 and verse 3, and again, notice the family discussion. When I was a son with my father, and you stop and think, assuming Solomon writes this, who's he talking about? David. When I was a son with my father, he said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live. My son, keep them within your heart, 4:20-21. keep your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life, and we'll come back to that in a second. Just think about this. This is so true. Satan often works in people's lives more through erosion than dynamiting them out of their faith. It's just little bitty things that were just cut the corner. This isn't that important. God won't care. Nobody is looking. Look at these admonitions from, again, the law. Deuteronomy 17:17. God said, don't multiply gold. Gold and silver are in Jerusalem like stones during the time of Solomon. And God said, don't multiply gold. Don't multiply horses. Don't go back to Egypt. And doesn't this tell us something? Solomon nearly spent twice as long building his house than he did the temple. On the way to Dallas, is it Sanger or whatever, just on the other side of town, is that magnificent, huge house that has never, ever, ever been finished. And if you know where it is, it's kind of, it'd make a good haunted house, because apparently there was a divorce and she wanted the house and he gave it to her but didn't give her anything to be able to finish it. Most of us don't spend 15, 20 years building a house. And what does it say about a person's priorities that he's going to spend twice as much time on his house as he does building the house of the Lord? Do you see what I'm saying in terms of the slide? Just very gently little things had happened and take place. But God also says, do not have many wives and do not marry foreign women. We had a lovely lady, Alice Merrill, who did a lot of Bible class. She either was in or heard a Bible class, and the boy came out and he had a picture of a porcupine, which from a little boy was kind of rough draft, and his mother said, what was that? And she said, well, she told us that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 porcupines. And so, being a little guy, he had drawn a picture of what he had learned in Bible class, and Solomon had had. Of course, we know the words concubines, but if you're a little guy, porcupine is pretty close. How far away from God's word can you get with that? Okay, girls, don't get a knot in your knickers. It's enough challenge for us to live with one of you compared to 700. But I'm just talking about life, okay? No one's being picked on. I literally just hold my head and think, what a chaos. Just think of all the immorality and everything else that's going on from that. And how do you end up there? Oh, it's little erosion, baby steps, little by little. Then those things slid in that direction. At our breakfast table, nearly every morning, I look at this. Why? To remind me today, God's word is reminding me you need to trust in the Lord with all your heart. When you look at this, can I have the next slide? When you look at this next one, and let's go to the next one after that. When Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods. First Kings 11:3 and 4. His heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father. There's a country and western song a few years ago that had a refrain that, and I just hear over and over when I read about Samson and Solomon, and the refrain says, what might have been? And the song goes on, talks about different things, says, oh, what might have been? And you stop and think, with all the advantages that he has, with the things physically and spiritually and everything else. Let me say it this way, because we're going to talk to both young people and older. But for those of us, especially that are 50 and older, that are past the continental divide in life, let this sink in. Solomon wasn't a teenager when his wives turned his heart away from God. And we all have to have a resolve to continue to be faithful all the way through. When you look at 1:2, the lack of a wholesome and godly family is a common denominator. God gave Solomon wisdom, but he was more influenced by his wives. God gave Samson strength, but he was more influenced by Delilah. And Everett Hufford had this wonderful expression in a class. When you look at the leaders in the Bible, some are cut off short, Jonathan specifically. Some will finish poorly, which again, Samson and Solomon. Some will finish so-so. But then he asked the question, how many finished well? When you look at all the leaders of the Bible, how many finished well? And I left a blank. It's less than 30%. Can I challenge each one of us to be one of the 30% tonight? As our kids grew up and they would leave for school, two things Sheila would say to them often. One was, let your light shine. Our granddaughter left us recently, and Sheila said, let your light shine. But the other that she would talk to them sometime about is, let's be one of the 10. If I use the word Sodom, are you there yet? This is politically incorrect today, but Brother McCord said, we know why Abraham was the first Israelite and the first Jew, because he got God from 50 down to 10. And if you've been around Jewish people, bargaining is just a way of life. That's just ingrained within them. Well, who is in Sodom? There's Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters. So can we say if we can find 6 in one city, we could save the city? And regardless of how evil society may come, as our kids would leave, Sheila would say, let's be one of the 10, regardless of what's going on around us. So if you turn the page, I want to do some application on trusting the Lord for our younger people. And like I said, I just like to do this because it ties the physical things with the spiritual. Give your heart to God. And just make a promise, I'm always going to put God first, and I'm going to give my heart to God, and love God with your heart, with your soul, with your mind, and with your strength. We were planting a new church when our kids were small and growing up, and numbers of people were baptized at different hours of the day and night, and they would get a little bit anxious. And one of the things that Sheila would talk with them about is that as long as you're a child, and she would spell, you are S-A-F-E, you are safe. But as you get older and as you understand the gospel more, then you will need to be baptized, and she would spell to be S-A-V-E-D, by hearing and knowing the gospel. For our teenagers, this to me is a very favorite verse. Sanctify Jesus as Lord in your heart. Sanctify means to set apart. Sanctify is something that's very special. And Paul would say, you are not your own, you are bought with a price. If I have sanctified Jesus in my heart, there are things that I will do because I'm following Jesus. And there are some other things I just will not do because I'm following Jesus. And that to me is a very, very important commitment that needs to be made. And young people, we want you to be faithful all your life. There will be a lot of challenges as you grow up. There's a lot of other imitations of churches, and those who are leaders in the church want our young people to grow up to be faithful both to the Lord and to the church. For those of us that are older, young adults, blessed are the pure in heart, they shall see God. Here's our word katharizo, we get the word catharsis from. And a purity of heart is a singleness. It's a sense of trust. And, especially for guys, the most important thing we can do for our children is to love their mother all of our lives. We've had 5 or 6 friends through the decades, how do you even say this, who traded her in for a younger model. And the devastation to the family and to the church and to other things. And guys, what is really important is that our first and primary emotional connection with anybody on earth has to be with our wife. Blessed are the pure in heart. And guys, it needs to be with our eyes, with our mind, and with our hands. Something that's clean, pure, and innocent. And then for those of us that are older, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. Keep watch over it, for from it flow the things of life. Occasionally, especially on Fridays, I've just taken a day off and gone away. And I was thinking about going down to the Blue River. Coach Goff, how far is it from the car to the horseshoe?
A long way.
Is it 30 minutes? I mean, seriously, is it 30 minutes or so? So I'm thinking about spending the whole day by myself. You're within waterfalls every 100 yards, trout fishing. But I had just, I don't know, it's kind of like you eat a little bit of Italian food or something, just a little bit of heartburn. You make a mistake when you tell your wife, guys, about that, and she says, you just really need to go to the doctor today. And I'm thinking, man, but I really would like to go fishing. And you walk in 30 minutes and you're out of phone coverage. Marty, you've been there hunting where you're just there. I finally got to the doctor's office just before noon. My doctor wasn't there, but one of the doctors in Road said, I'll take him. While I'm in the doctor's office, the front vessel across my heart stops, and I have a heart attack in the doctor's office. No pain, no shoulder, no throbbing, but I can't walk. What happens if you walked in 30 minutes and you're out of phone coverage and you can't walk and you're all by yourself? I might not have survived. And you stop and think, guarding our physical heart is the essence of breathing. Guarding our spiritual heart is the essence of living. My grandfather was an elder, and the last years of his life, he was in a care facility, and bless his heart, the little man next to him just swore profusely. Well, my grandfather would pray louder than the guy was swearing next to him because he was not going to sit there and listen to profanity all the time. And the family finally came and said, you're just going to have to, someone's got to move. We don't mind him praying, but he shouldn't have to pray all day just to keep from hearing this other. Even in his bed, he wasn't going to allow those things to get into his mind. Guard your spiritual heart with all diligence. Your thoughts control your life. Go to the next one. There's trust in the Lord. Go to the next one. This is a tombstone of a beloved aunt, and it'll be hard to see this just because of the distance. Aunt Faye was a church secretary out in the far, far western Texas in a church for 21 years. All church secretaries have stars in their crowns for, you just wouldn't believe what goes on in a church office through the week. I'm not talking about Marty, I'm not talking about him, I'm just talking about the stuff that happens off the street and other things. But she would just read church bulletins, and she kept a manila envelope, and every time she thought, oh, he might like that, then she would clip that, and every so often I'd get this manila envelope with just articles and poems and stuff in it. But decades before they died, they did their tombstone, and here was their names and their children. But guess what she put on the very bottom of it? Every time, I sent one of the grandchildren around to get the picture, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own insights. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Marty, can I borrow you just for a second? We have a heart surgeon in our hospital, so I asked him if I could borrow one of these. And what does a physical doctor do? And I'm not going to even try to put it in my ears. We'll just do this for tonight. But what does a physical doctor do when he says, take a deep breath? Take a deep breath. What's the doctor doing? He's listening to our heart. If we were able to check your spiritual heart tonight, what would we find if we checked your spiritual heart?
Good question.
When this one quits, we quit breathing. The spiritual heart will live on. I've actually cried at times reading Solomon. Let me do it the other way. Reading Proverbs and then reading about the life of Solomon. His life ended up being such a contradiction to the things that he had written so well and the things that have instructed us so well. My last thought is this. I was anxious, which at times we all get anxious. You remember Paul comes to Troas and doesn't know how the church in Corinth is doing. A door's been opened and he leaves because he's anxious. At the tomb of Lazarus, it's like Jesus' insides are being twisted. He's being troubled. So as humans, there's times we are always anxious. I had the blessing of being with a couple, and he was actually a professional counselor with a spiritual background. And he said, I have something I want you to do when you get anxious. He said, first of all, just kind of stop, take a couple of deep breaths and focus. And then here it came, he said, and I want you just to say the word trust. He said, not everything else, just the word trust. Well, guess what verse came to my mind when he said that? Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. And he said, you can't trust and worry at the same time. And he said, the next time you feel anxious, take a couple of deep breaths, center yourself, and stop and think, for whatever is going on in my life, God is going to be able to help me through this as long as I trust in him. One of the major factors of whether you enter gates of pearl, walk streets of gold, or partake of the tree of life will be the care that you give to your spiritual heart while you're here. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and rely not on your own understanding.
I think Dale is the reason for me that introductions are pointless. Just let the man talk, and what he has to say will prove itself, and you won't need an introduction. Thank you, brother. Appreciate your great words tonight. I can't think of a better way to end our summer series. This is the last one. Pray to the Lord. Next week, you've got me again. Thank you all for being here. I love you.